Welcome back to On Background, the podcast that goes behind the scenes in investigative journalism to show you how these stories get made. I'm here with my co-host Eric Eggers from the Government Accountability Institute, and we have a great show for you today. So much fraud is swirling around all over the country, especially in California. It makes Minnesota fraud look like chump change. And now we hear that J.D. Vance is pledging to swoop in and come to the rescue to save California taxpayer dollars and other states as well from getting flushed down the drain. We also will take a look at this crazy news out of LA yesterday. Mayor Bass watered down an after-action Palisades fire report. Nixon had Watergate, and Bass now has watered down gate. I wrote a very long story, investigative in-depth piece that combines blatant and disgusting California fraud, Gavin Newsom, Bill Clinton, and the suicide of a major Hollywood billionaire. Gavin Newsom was showered with donations from this fraudster homeless firm, but he's too busy doing his ridiculous Vogue interviews to deal with my questions about whether he's going to give the money to California taxpayers. So Eric, I think you read my piece. I don't know, it's pretty long and in depth, but I was pretty upset that Gavin Newsom didn't even bother. He was too busy with his fawning interviews in Vogue and New Yorker this week to deal with my questions about what are you doing with this money from these fraudster homeless firms.
Yeah, Susan, I read your story, which is excellent, about how Gavin Newsom refuses to cut ties with this very shady and suspect Shangrila homeless fraudster firm. I also, America, read the Vogue profile on Gavin Newsom, so you don't have to. And Susan, I know that you might have found it to be quite challenging, some of the cartoonish and superfluous praise and fawning language that and the pictures. Don't forget the pictures of Gavin Newsom. But let's start with the real journalism, which is, of course, your story. Shangrila Industries, so many different things are so weird about this, but this is a thing that was started by a man who's now dead by suicide, Steve being a major donor to Democrats Party, and yet somehow the story of this firm, which wins all these contracts to allegedly perform homeless services in California, only gets weirder from there.
Yeah, it is a very weird concept. And you can't get over the fact that the name is called Shangrila, this firm. It's really become Gavin Newsom's homeless hell. It's part of this. It's really dragging him down. And now we see, J.D. Vance is kind of go head to head with him on fraud if they both get into this 2020 race, which we know they will. So we take a look at this fraudster firm, Shangrila. It started out entertainment mogul Steve Bing. He's a billionaire. He's giving a lot of donations from everyone from Nancy Pelosi to John Kerry, and Bill Clinton was actually on the payroll of Shangrila. Then he sells it. He commits suicide in 2020 amid Gavin Newsom's lockdowns. And his friends said that the reason why he committed suicide was because he was depressed because he was too isolated during COVID, interestingly enough. So then he sells it. Before that, he sells it to this part of his firm called Shangrila Construction. It's a housing builder, apartments in various buildings in LA. He sells it to this man named Andy Meyer, who also has an alias. He also goes by Andy Abdul Wahab. So he sells it to him, and all of a sudden they are trying to get into the homeless business around after that, like around COVID time, because Gavin Newsom's signature program was converting motels into hotels. Well, they defraud the U.S. taxpayer dollars. They got $100 million, Eric, in state contracts. And then we find out they're embezzling the money. The CFO, very young CFO, is embezzling the money to pay for his $46,000 a month rent in a Beverly Hills mansion, a Bentley, a Ferrari, diamond necklaces for his girlfriend. And that is why there's no oversight in California. It took Bill Asaley, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, to indict and arrest this individual. there was no consequences before that for him.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare this to the Minnesota fraud. So, I mean, in Minnesota fraud, you have people allegedly providing child care services for children that don't exist, food for kids, and the meals never existed. In this case, it's there's a lot of things that didn't exist. I mean, what the CEO has two different names, but the bank account has none of the money that they claim to have, and no one checked into it. I think you're reporting that there was $59 million. Is that right? That they allegedly had in the Bank of America? Because to apply for these grants, they're like, no, we can do this. We have a lot of resources. We have $59 million in a bank account. And you're saying that that actually wasn't true.
Yes, according to the FBI affidavit that became part of the indictment against this Cody Holmes, who was 28 at the time and was the CFO of the Shangrila construction firm, that bank account with $16 million that was part of their application didn't exist. It was completely non-existent. And so I talked to a Secret Service, retired Secret Service. He's a friend of the show, Rich Starpoli, and he did this for a living after he left for a big hedge fund that does these types of investments. He made sure that their people they were approaching and funding weren't giving them fraudulent information. So he said, this is just basic. Even if you get a car loan, the car loan company would go and check that you have the money in the bank that you say you have. So there is no verification. And Gavin Newsom and Bill Asaley, the U.S. attorney who indicted this individual, who was just embezzling, looting taxpayer monies that was supposed to be going for homelessness housing, they got into a fight, Bill Asaley and Gavin Newsom, punching back and forth on X about whether Gavin Newsom has any fault in this fact that this fraud in the homelessness program, his signature program, exists. He says he doesn't have any fault in it, Eric.
Well,
I mean, are you kidding me?
Well, so there might be reasons for that, right? So, like, while the money didn't exist in this Bank of America account that they claimed was going to help them prepare and provide homeless services, which, of course, they didn't do, they did spend some money. It may not have been money on homeless services, but they did spend money, as you note in your report, on campaign contributions, including some to Gavin Newsom. And so now that this person's been indicted, as you noted, it's common practice for people to return donations. So the question number one is, how much money did this fraudulent firm, Shangrila, give to Gavin Newsom and Associates? And number two, what are they saying when you're calling up? You're doing real journalism here. You're calling up and saying, do you plan on returning this money? What are they saying?
Yeah, there's a lot of crickets going on when I call and say if they're going to return this money. So it's funny to me because Gavin Newsom, this is common practice. I've been doing this type of journalism, for decades now, and they always give the money back. It's if some firm been proven to be a fraudster firm, I would call it. The CFO is indicted for embezzling taxpayer dollars for all of this lavish lifestyle for he and his girlfriend. Of course you'd want to distance yourself from that firm, and you do it by saying, I'm going to get back the money, not to the firm, but to the California taxpayers. This is what we do. But he has no qualms about not getting back to my questions about it and keeping the money. And he got 18,000, but I also have this mysterious 30,000 that went from Shangrila Investments, and I'm trying to prove that that's the same firm. Shangrila Investments is the same as Shangrila Industries. So I asked them, is this the same firm? Do you know about this firm? Crickets, and they do respond to me when they want to. So they pick and choose when they respond to me. I asked a congressman who got the same money, Bob Garcia, who represents Long Beach area. I asked the LA County Democrats if they would return the money. Crickets. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom's basically saying it's not my fault. The 30K is very mysterious, Eric. I mean, I talked to you about this. I talked to Cody Holmes, is the guy who embezzled the money and was living in that Beverly Hills mansion with this beautiful pool, and that's what he was using our taxpayer dollars for in California. I talked to his power lawyer who represented Harvey Weinstein and other big names like that. And I asked him about this particular donation, Shangrila Investments, 30,000 for the homelessness bill is a ballot initiative that Gavin Newsom supported. It was his signature program to give $6 billion more for homelessness. This was last year, and it barely passed, only by 50.2% in Democrat-dominated California. But he said no comment on whether that was a sane firm giving that 30K. So basically, you're taking U.S. taxpayer dollars because it's fungible. They're fungible. You're taking U.S. taxpayer dollars and you're perpetuating more funding, $6 billion to the tune of $6 billion more, so that you can use it for your own embezzlement purposes. It's just unbelievably corrupt and disgusting. It's like a self-licking ice cream cone. You're going to use the taxpayer dollars to perpetuate all of this billions of dollars being misspent in California on homelessness.
Yeah, and here's why I love this.
Angry.
And you may not know this because if you haven't read this article, but basically, like, Gavin Newsom awards money, oversees the awarding money to this firm, which doesn't exist. They get indicted for fraud, but they're giving money back to Gavin Newsom in terms of campaign contributions, and they're also contributing towards his signature initiative, which is more money for homelessness, which of course they receive. That's the self-licking ice cream cone. So that happens, and that's something that Gavin Newsom is very much a part of. This Vogue profile, they begin with his speech to It's the State of the State in California, and it includes this quote. He says, his tone is temperate, but the words echo through the state capitol's assembly chamber. Quote, this is Gavin Newsom, lining the pockets of the rich, crony capitalism at an unimaginable scale, rolling back rights, rewriting history. None of this is normal, he says. Now, in the speech, he's talking about Donald Trump, but that's kind of everything you just laid out in this one example of this homeless scandal.
Yeah, absolutely. That piece was just what we expected, but it was worse than we expected, because we knew that there was going to be this rollout for his book, Boy in a Hurry, it's the title. We knew he was going to be getting this fawning press, especially from the glossy magazines that don't provide that. Meanwhile, people in Melania Trump can't have her documentary. It's, panned in the press by the liberal media. But yet he gets all this fawning coverage for a man, and they asked no tough questions in that profile. And then he had a New Yorker profile at the same time. So he was so busy basking in the glow of that embarrassing press, glowing press, that he couldn't answer my questions about where the money is going and why is he keeping it. It's the whole thing is disgusting.
You should know, by the way, to your point about no tough questions, there's a specific example that's especially galling. I did want to ask, I want to get your reaction, because you are, among other things, a Gavin Newsom expert. You've written a book with our colleague Jed McFadder called Fool's Gold. You have a chapter called Growing Up Getty about like his access to privilege, but it uses this line in this profile piece. It says, quote, he was raised by a single mom who'd hold down 2 or 3 jobs, and he had to be the man of the house in a way. People assume Newsom comes from money. He doesn't. Access, yes. Privilege, yes. Money, no. Is that accurate?
Well, I want to know, because I did the timeline on this, why Gavin Newsom's father, who was by then was appointed to be a judge, when he was very young, and he was appointed by Jerry Brown, who's also part of these worlds of powerful people in San Francisco. Jerry Brown's father, who was governor, they both were governor to a dynasty in California and San Francisco. So I want to know, Edmund Jerry Brown Sr. appointed Gavin Newsom's father to a judgeship in Placer County. Why was he not paying child support? Is that what was happening here? Were they living beyond their means in a too expensive house in San Francisco, and so that's why they were taking in all this money, all these foster children. He said he took in foster children and renters. So that's my question. And then, of course, I've written about his so-called baseball career that lasted just 3 months in his freshman year at Santa Clara, and how he got into Santa Clara University when he had terrible grades, and he blames it on dyslexia, and SAT scored of 960. So he had a Rolex on. I've reported that one baseball player that I talked to said, the only thing I remember about Gavin Newsom in baseball was that one time he lost his Rolex outside the Duggan, and he was desperate to find it. And I didn't even know what a Rolex was at the time because I was 17.
But Susan,
So
doesn't that speak to how poor he was? He wasn't so rich that he loses a Rolex and it doesn't matter to him. You know, it like he's a one Rolex guy. You know, he's only got the one, and when he loses
right.
it matters. And that's probably not true for many people that truly consider themselves part of the wealthy elite. So a data point for a man of the people, Gavin Newsom. Two other things from this profile that are worth pointing out. Number one, and you know this because you've covered him and you've seen the way he'll have Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon on and be kind of like, oh, we all need to come together to kind of figure these things out, find some common ground. And then now he's the face of the resistance against Donald Trump. The profile uses the line, Newsom sees himself as continuously iterating. It's one of his favorite words. So he's constantly,
I
it's not,
understand that word.
he doesn't flip-flop, he iterates. So that's important. And then to your point about no tough questions and leading into, I think, another big story in the news, especially in California, but in many ways it's a national story because of Gavin Newsom's connection to it. There's a lot of things that get covered in this Vogue profile. I didn't do a word count, but it covers a lot of background. It talks about the ways in which he stacks the dishes in the dishwasher, when he cleans up, when he cooks. There's a lot of detail in there.
All the important issues in California right now.
And the reporter goes, we didn't have time to get into things like the LA wildfires. So that's not discussed in this piece. I'm not sure if it's in the New Yorker, but that appears to be a story that I think if he does run for president, will be a big deal because it continues to be a big deal right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So this week we found out a lot about Karen Bass. The LA Times of all people, and I don't know if the LA Times broke this huge story about Karen Bass watering down a final report, after action report of Palisades to show that that really kind of modified the language, saying that they were at fault. The city and the LA Fire Department were at fault for not pre-positioning resources and fire trucks where they should have been in Palisades when the winds were so high. And Karen Bass was in Ghana, right? You remember that. So she watered this down according to the LA Times. And I'm really my first reaction to this story is like, wow, the LA Times is providing some serious oversight for a change. Why are they doing that? I've noticed a change in the LA Times just in the last 2 weeks. And my suspicion is they are responding to the California Post arrival on the scene in LA. And certainly they're mixing it up now. This was a darn good story from the LA Times. And I haven't seen this type of story, this real, serious journalistic coverage, investigative coverage of any political figure, Newsom or Karen Bass, from the LA Times in a very, very long time. So, yeah, this story is now they're calling it out on the X, stratosphere here that it's her Nixon had Watergate, but she has watered down Gate, and I thought was pretty good. Even Rick Caruso now, who ran against her, is saying that he wasn't going to run for LA mayor, but now he's reconsidering. He might jump in the race because she's such damaged goods after this story.
It's one of a number of scandals in California at the moment, and you wonder now with J.D. Vance kind of leading this new task force to look into California fraud. I mean, Minnesota, I think the fraud stories became so relevant nationally because the fraud was so big, and it was just like these Somali groups and just everything. Do you think with J.D. Vance being in charge of it, does it make it more overtly political, or do you think that we'll find the fraud is so rampant that it kind of doesn't matter if it's the vice president and potential political rival to Gavin Newsom leading the charge to uncover it? It will stand on its face as a scandal by itself.
I think it's really smart. Politics, everything is political right now, so you can't take the politics out of this. But I think it's really smart because J.D. Vance, I was even thinking recently, he doesn't have a profile. Now, thank goodness he doesn't have the terrible profile that Kamala Harris got. I mean, she got saddled with the root causes of immigration when the root causes of immigration was the open door policy of the Biden administration. So I don't know if that was on purpose by Joe Biden or not, but it certainly wasn't something, it was a negative, a drag on her potential candidacy afterwards. And certainly he didn't think he was going to get pushed to the side. So he didn't realize that that was going to be harming his vice president and the ability for her to win against Donald Trump. But J.D. Vance, I think this sets up a tete between Vance and Gavin Newsom. It's already happening. It's already shaping up the race 2028. But if J.D. Vance can, really do something, show that he had an impact on fraud in California and other states, because his task force portfolio expands to other states as well. But if he can show that the corruption, the level of corruption in California, and expose it, then Gavin Newsom, it goes directly to Gavin Newsom's leadership and Vance's ability to get things done and sweep it clean.
Well, I'll say this. I think even, whether J.D. Vance can add to his own political portfolio remains to be seen. By all accounts, he's a smart guy. And there doesn't seem to be a shortage of things to look for and to elevate and expose in ways that should help J.D. Vance and hurt Gavin Newsom. But just kind of to end where we started, which is in your profile on this latest scandal in California and Gavin Newsom's ties to this fraudulent homeless ring and his refusal to say whether or not he'll return the donations. As you pointed out, I think you and Jed broke the news that, having donations from scandalous partners is not new to Gavin Newsom. And he's previously accepted donations from utility companies who have been proven to be responsible for the fires in the state. So by comparison and in context, taking money from a group that may have defrauded the state for millions of dollars pales in comparison to participating in the actual deaths and natural wildfires that he's been a part of. But so it doesn't matter really how much more fraud Gavin Newsom's connected to. I mean, it's bad, but the stuff he's connected to that we already know about's quite bad and really should be disqualified anyway.
That's a great point, Eric, because I looked at the latest ballot initiative and there was that 30,000 mysterious donation from Shangrila Investments, but there were also donations from PG&E after he swore off donations from PG&E back when after the Camp Fire, the Paradise Fire that should have been the canary in the coal mine for the Palisades Fire. All of this should have been reformed so there was no Palisades Fire after 84 people were killed in the Paradise Fire in 2017. So all of a sudden, PG&E once again is donating to his pet causes for $6 billion more in homeless spending. That it was so right at that moment, yes, last year and the beginning of the year, people are so sick of spending billions. There's $24 billion that was already spent by then. They didn't want $6 billion more, but here came PG&E and SoCal Edison, the parent company of SoCal Edison, which caused the Eaton fire at the same time as the Palisades fire. They also donated to that initiative. These utilities, you really need to take a look at the corruption involved. We have a whole chapter in our book, Fool's Gold, about the cozy relationship. Literally, they were paid for Gavin Newsom's wife's, Jennifer Siebel Newsom's documentary films. They screened them in the downtown headquarters of PG&E. You really need to take a look at this if you want to, hopefully J.D. Vance will, to root out the true corruption that's going on in California, as we all have our rate hikes, 6 rate hikes over the last year that were approved by the Public Utility Commission. So it goes on and on, the fraud in California. And I'm just, there's people descending on my state. Nick Shirley is here. You have other different organizations cropping up. J.D. Vance is now taking a look at homeless fraud. Well, we started it with our book, Fool's Gold, So I'm more than happy to have more people jump in and expose it. The more, the better, because there's so much here.
No, that's absolutely right. And we'll continue to bring you stories that matter, both in terms of California and at the national level, because, Gavin Newsom's a national figure. J.D. Vance is a national figure. And we're going to elevate, if Gavin Newsom's going to run against what he's calling crony capitalism, then I think any examples of crony capitalism he himself have participated in that we've proven, both in terms of your reporting and the stuff we've done here at the Government Accountability Institute, remains fair game. And that's what we'll bring to you on the record in this podcast, which is On Background with Susan Crabtree. Thank you guys so much, as always, for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit like or subscribe. Leave a comment, if you like, on whatever platform you're consuming this on. And we'll see you again with more new reporting and behind-the-scenes stories next week. Thanks so much.